Environment. Uh, Let me introduce myself. My name is Dr. Zulfikar. I'm a lecturer at Universitas Islam Indonesia. As a disabled, I'm actually the founder of Sekolabilitas, an NGO focusing on providing access to education for students in Indonesia. COVID-19 has brought many implications to the world, and without exception is to the education world or to the academic world. Many academic institutions around the world, including in Indonesia, have brought their education into an online platform. Although it has offered some advantages, many people are facing challenges in adapting to the new method. And of course, children with disabilities are among one of the most impacted. Those who are blind, deaf, having mental disabilities, having speech difficulties, and the disabled in general are facing a lot of difficulties in using technology in their education. Schools and universities are not prepared to adapt to the online platform for the disabled students. Disabled are not able to receive education as they're supposed to. Some disabled who need caretakers or parents' assistance also face the same problem because this individual also do not know how to adapt with online platform. This has been made worse by the financial condition of these people. And therefore, we gathered today to discuss this very important topic, primarily to discuss on what disability movement can do to provide access for the disabled when it comes to education and health, and especially those who live in rural areas. And to speak about this topic, we have with us today a very amazing speakers. We have and committee member on the rights of persons with disability. And we have Nila Tanzil, who is a Senior Equity Initiative Fellow and the founder of Rainbow Reading Gardens. And the last one we have all the way from the Philippines, Abelardo Apollo Ilagan David Jr., who is also a Senior Equity Initiative Fellow and the founder of the Independent Living and Learning Center in Manila. Each speaker will have 15 to 20 minutes to speak, and then by around 5 minutes to 11 or 10:55, we will start our 3 minutes discussion. All right, for now, I will give the floor to Mbak Risna Kami. Mbak, suaranya. Can you please unmute?
Mohon maaf, Ibu Risna, mungkin bisa diklik unmute buttonnya, yang gambar mikrofon.
Yeah, I'm trying to.
Okay, sudah.
Can you hear? Yeah, there you go. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for inviting me, and I'm so pleased to meet you all today. First of all, I would like to thank you for the University of Gadjah Mada in Yogyakarta that invite me to share the perspective of the disability rights movement, especially in the Indonesian context. I think I should have the UGM to how do I say to share the presentation. So I think change the presenter, or maybe the UGM can help me to show the presentation. So first of all, show my screen. Yeah. So first of all, I would like to share about the importance of the disability rights movement. I have 4 key points that I would like to share all of you. The first is about the importance of the disability rights movement, and the second is about the importance of the fundamental principles, and the third is about the example and the strategy and approach that we adopted in the movement. Because the background, I've been working in the disability rights movement since 1998. So it's been quite a while for me to do the analysis of how the importance of the rights of children with disability in terms of inclusive education. I think I can get the here. I'm sorry, I have a technical problem in my computer for some reason, and let me see here. Okay, I think I can have screen. Yeah. Wait a minute. So I hope that this is going to be the Yeah. I hope every one of you can see clearly. I'm so sorry. This is kind of my challenging to to adapt the situation about the new normal, how to present virtually. Yeah, this is what I'm gonna say today. I'm gonna share with you all, and I just skip the first slide, and the second is about the situation of persons with disability. That's why our disability rights movement is really strong in Indonesia, because this is what has been happening in Indonesia and majority in many different parts of the world, where we are facing major barriers when we don't have rehabilitation and equipment. And if we take a look at the pandemic, the virus outbreak at the moment, how vulnerable we are at the moment, since we don't have any access at all, especially those who are living in the remote area. And so far, without the pandemic involved, we are already facing multiple barriers, such as physical barriers, attitudinal barriers, and lack of rehabilitation and equipment, plus the technology. And at the moment, the government just give us the temporary solution on how to, to get the access, for example, wheelchair, accessibility, and also our opportunity to have inclusive education. Or even in the special school, we still, a lot of children with disability got rejected. This is the importance of the disability rights movement that I would like to share all of you, whether you are academia, whether you are working for the community, you are working for the NGO, and this is part of the heart of the key of our movement when we embracing called nothing about us without us. So this is very important to understand for all of the stakeholders that are working for and with people with disability, the importance of effective and meaningful participation through their representative organizations. And this is part of the heart of the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disability that I've been working in the United Nations and try to promote this to the all state parties or government and parliamentarian member, how to adopt the human rights and development tool into every single policies, budget allocation and other related regulatory or regulation when it comes to the rights of children with disability, in particular the rights to inclusive education. So in many cases that as a persons with disability, including children with disability, we are not being involved. We are not being consulted, by any stakeholder. So then we can contribute to find the best solution, the best of our expertise that we can contribute to solve the barriers. And so far, not many stakeholders, including state parties, do not know about what is the CRPD or the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disability. At the moment, we already have 183 countries ratify the conventions. That means they have to do the consequences, to do the legal harmonization, to do the budget allocation, and also to do inclusive programming, including inclusive education. So all persons with disability can enjoy human rights as everybody else. And my next slide is going to be the concept of disability toward the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disability. So we mentioned here about the interaction. The key word to connect between people with disability and environment is interaction. Whether in the environment barriers has to be removed or the support needs to be provided. And if the barriers is to be removed, that means inclusion and participation can be enjoyed, can people with disability can have inclusion and equal participation. If it's not, that means, you know, we are not happy, we are considered to be segregated in the community. And actually disability, we can say that it's a restriction of participation. It's not about ourselves. I'm a wheelchair user. It doesn't mean that because I'm a wheelchair user, I cannot go to school, but because of the restriction of my participation to interact with the barriers that I have to deal with the environment. So that's the kind of the concept that I would like to share with all of you. It's not because of my disability, but because of the restriction of participation, and because of the barrier is not removed within my environment, so I cannot, you know, be participated, I cannot be inclusive in the mainstream school. The fundamental principles that in the UNCRPD that I'm, you know, on and on try to emphasize to the all government, including the government of Indonesia, all of the NGO working on inclusive education, and also academia. The general principle of the CRPD strengthened that the non-discrimination, accessibility is part of the key word or key principle that needs to be adopted in all of the education practices, culture, and also system. Without adopting these fundamental principles, inclusive education cannot be achieved in Indonesia and another part of the world. Part of that is because we don't have participation, we are not included in the society, and we are not respect for our differences and part of the human diversity and humanity. The other thing is about women and girls with disability. It says here there's equality between men and women and respect for the evolving capacities of children with disabilities. We are really inferior, you know, compared with other disability. Men with disability, boys with disability. So girl with disability more likely is more vulnerable to get violence in school, plus more inferior to access to education. We are more having equality than men with disability. And the second principle is about accessibility. So this is the importance how all of the educational culture, system, and practices has to have adopt these principles, how to be supporting all students with disability, in particular children with disability, to provide choice and equal basis with other students, and also accessibility as mentioned as the prerequisites for the inclusion of people with disability. And accessibility is not including physical accessibility, for example, like the ramp for wheelchair to get in and out the building, but also accessibility in terms of ICT, information, communication, and technology, which is considered as a non-physical disability. And all of this adoption of accessibility should also related to the universal design. That means all of the design not only just can be accessed by persons with disability, but also for all people. So accessibility is not inclusively or exclusively, I would say exclusively for people with disability, but also people without disability. I also concern how the older people generation to access to, you know, other public spaces, and also other, like for example library, how can get in there without accessibility. And once we have universal design adopted on public spaces, all people can utilize it. And this is very important to emphasize that accessibility is not exclusively for people with disability, but for all people. And why I mention this, because during the pandemic, we have to adjust this different type of accessibility. For example, built environment, transportation, information, communication, assistive technology, and availability of support staff, especially in the university or other school, that they have to be, for example, to do the home care education, for example, they have to facilitate children with disability to access to education as a personal assistant so they can access the online learning, for example, like that. And then assistive technology, how can use the computer, so then for children with visual impairment, they can adjust their computer so the computer can talk. For example, the computer has to be adjusted with the JAWS program, where the computer is, can read for you, something like that, that we really basically have to identify each student or children with disability, what are the specific needs in order to adjust the online learning. And this type of a learning or aspect of accessibility needs to be adapted. And one thing that I would like to mention about accessibility is a reasonable accommodation. When it comes to rights to inclusive education, which is the fundamental principle number 3, all of the academia or schools needs to understand about the reasonable accommodation is, because accessibility and reasonable accommodation is compelling each other. And I should emphasize that the denial of reasonable accommodation is a form of discrimination. And this is what we are strongly advocate in our movement, how to provide not only accessibility, but also reasonable accommodation that is actually aimed to provide individualized support for children with disability in order to rights to inclusive education. So not only mentioned in the Article 24 of the CRPD on the inclusive education, but also in the general comment of the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disability number 4 on the rights of the inclusive education. So this is kind of a guideline of how to implement Article 24 for all of the government stakeholders, including all of the schools, universities, the importance to adopt the fundamental human rights of all learners. It means all of the students with disabilities, and also a principle that values the well-being of all students in respecting inherent dignity and autonomy. Basically, children with disability have, still facing ignorance, still facing discrimination against toward their disability. And usually the actor that doing the discrimination, also their family, the school, and other stakeholders that don't understand about the fundamental human rights of the inclusive education. Basically, the inclusive education is also provide solution in order to eliminate barriers to the rights to inclusive education. And the goals is actually to change the culture, policy, and practice that has been happening in the mainstream school. What is the mainstream school? I think I should say that there is in Indonesia and many, including the Philippines, you have special school, but we also have mainstream school. But unfortunately, all of this school, they don't understand or even they don't adopt about the inclusive education that basically provide more transformative solution for all children with disability on how to make them to be more included in the society and also the in their community. So what we have been facing or problem that we are been that also happening for children with disability during the first outbreak is accessing the school and how they can go to or access to education in the remote area without internet. So that's also some other thing that the state or the government should provide at some point, they have to work together with the schools and the university. And one of the article of the CRPD that mentioned on Article 11 on the emergency situation related to the inclusive education. And in our disability rights movement, we are struggling to ask the government and even the parliamentarian member to understand about learning environment to make children with disability can have equal basis of education. So they don't even understand about the budget allocation to have to be adjusted, how to provide leave assistance, which is personal assistant that can come to home that can help the students to access to education. And this such measure has to be taken by the government, around the world right now. We cannot wait. And this is kind of a progressive realization that all of the government should do because of the pandemic and also about the uncertainty, when the pandemic will decrease, the infection will decrease, but the children needs to learn, the children needs to have reasonable accommodation that has to be provided by the government. And this is one of the strategy that also approach that our movement trying to advocate the government in Indonesia. It's called the twin track approach to disability inclusive development. Since Indonesia also adopted the Agenda 2030, I think many of you understand about sustainable development goals. This is the outcome document that it's non-legally binding, different with the CRPD that it's legally binding for all state parties. But the SDGs, if it's in line with the CRPD, it needs to adopt the twin track approach to disability inclusive development. The first thing, we have to mainstream disability rights in all sectors, including education. At the same time, disability-specific initiative has to be taken because mainstreaming disability rights, it's not enough to provide inclusive approach for persons with disability in terms of education. This approach can trigger to have equality of rights and opportunity for all persons with disability in all development sectors, including health. And this is part of the approach that has been adopted by Australian government, New Zealand government, but Indonesia is still struggling to adopt this twin track approach. This is the national strategy that we offer in terms of disability rights movement. We are using the CRPD as our human rights tool to approach the government as our fundamental principle to provide accessibility and reasonable accommodation to inclusive education, because so many children, and I think the number is so high for children with disability that can access mainstream school at the moment. That's why we are trying to advocate the importance of the fundamental principle of the CRPD, in particular accessibility and reasonable accommodation. And we also have to advocate the parents who have children with disability, because there are still a different mindset towards the parents who have children with disability, that they are more protective for their children. They don't have, they don't give the opportunity and space for children with disability to exercise their human rights. And we still need to advocate the parents group at this point. And the third is how to ensure the government to take actions, in particular the budget allocation, to support inclusive education for children with disability, in particular in the remote islands and the remote areas of Indonesia, because we are living in the archipelago, which is pretty much, spread out, in many different islands, and it takes a while, it takes strategy and comprehensive approach on how to provide inclusive education for all children with disability in Indonesia. And the other thing related to the pandemic right now, we have to create health protocol that adjust and also can protect the needs of children with disabilities, so they are living in the safe environment with their parents and the community. The other thing, the national strategy that I would like to offer about meaningful participation and partnership. This is also important, how we are left behind in the development. As you know, the principle of the Sustainable Development Goals are mentioning about no one left behind. But again, in terms of people with disability, children with disability, when it comes to participation and partnership, we never been involved. We never just invited, never been heard. This is part of the challenge that's still happening in Indonesia and other part of the world, especially in the low income countries. And the last one is about the rights-based approach, which is using the CRPD as the human rights and development tools in terms of development. And in the pandemic, has to be done by all government and academia. The human rights-based approach has been replaced other model on disability. I can mention about medical model. I can mention about charity-based model on disability. So right-based approach actually offer transformative solution over more new mindset for the government. I would say for the new normal, this is a very good approach that we can utilize in terms of inclusive education for our children with disability. And the last presentation in my slide is offering how to provide inclusive for all. So in terms of partnership, I would say the first thing that we need to have is establish partnership, which is with the academia, to understand about the gap, how the human rights model and the medical model, charity-based model actually can, we can replace this model into more human rights-based approach that we promote partnership. We promote raise awareness. That's why in the CRPD we have article on raising awareness about disability as an ongoing activity to eliminate stigma, discrimination, and also the left behind of the rights of inclusive education for children with disability. And we also have to reach and serve. Probably we have to provide home education, for example, to provide live assistance for children that they need more technical assistance in terms of inclusive education. And for the government, they have to provide policy laws and budget allocation in order to provide inclusive for all. And for academia, of course, they have to promote research and also have to find more partnership that is more promoting a right-based approach rather than medical and charity-based approach. And I think this is a last statement that I can, share with you all today. The importance how to link inclusive education to the human rights-based approach and how we include children with disability in creating our culture, our system, and good practices in terms of providing inclusive education for all. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Bu Rishna, for a very wonderful explanation on how should we build a national strategy to give better access to education for the disabled individuals here in Indonesia. If I can take some notes, the most important of which I think is to provide partnership with the government and disability rights movement as awareness, research, as well as budget allocation for to provide a better education, especially during this pandemic. And our next speaker is Mbak Nila Tanzil, who is a Senior Equity Initiative Fellow and the founder of Rainbow Reading Garden, who will give us a bit of insight about providing education in rural areas during and after the COVID-19 pandemic. And without further ado, I will give the floor to Mbak Nila.
Thank you, Zulfikar. Oh, still mute. Is it still mute? Oh, no. Thank you, Zulfikar, for the introduction, and thank you, UGM and the Equity Initiative for having me today. It's a pleasure. So today, I will share my screen. Can everyone see it? Sharing my screen. Yeah, Zulfikar, can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see your screen.
Okay, thank you. So this morning I will discuss a little bit about COVID-19 and the threats to education equity in Indonesia. Right. Yeah. So in Indonesia, as we know, at the moment schools are closed. Well, now it's still school holiday, but before that, since March until before the end term finished, the schools were closed, and it will resume to close until further notice, but with areas that are in the green zone. The Minister of Education says that the schools could be open, but that is only 6% of green zone in our country. So what are the consequences? So 45 million students are impacted. 45 million, that's a lot of number. And the rest of Indonesia who are on orange zone, red zone, so other than green zone, we have to do online learning, like it or not. So how effective is online learning? How effective that kids learn from home? Data from Inovasi is a DFAT-funded program, says that actually 72% of students still do offline learning using books. And this happens especially in East Nusa Tenggara, West Nusa Tenggara, and in other remote areas in Indonesia. And only 24% of the respondents that do online learning. And this happened especially on Java Island. So why is that? There are a lot of factors, and when it comes to remote areas, of course they face many challenges, and even now there are still villages that have no access to electricity. Actually, 14,000 villages still have no access to electricity. And when it comes to connectivity, the internet, yes, we have 171 million of internet users in Indonesia. However, when we talk about remote areas, in Papua, Sulawesi, and Maluku, only 10% of the whole population that are internet users. So only like very, very, very few people. And when it comes to Nusa Tenggara, only 5% of the whole population that are internet users. So you can imagine how big the challenges are when our government say, hey, let's do online learning. What happened to the kids who have no access to the internet. And even for those who have access to the internet, not all parents have or can afford buying internet data or have the proper gadget that support their kids to learn using internet. Right? And when it comes to students with special needs, the data say that actually only 58% of the students of the schools have no special efforts to treat their students with special needs in the time of pandemic. They could either don't know how to do, or like with only little knowledge on how to handle these things, etc. And this is the data from the Ministry of Education. Since everyone now, all the kids have to learn from home, how effective it is. So students, mostly all of less than half students learn every day. So a majority of them don't even study every day. Majority of them only study 2 to 4 days a week, as you can see in this data. And even like only 9% study only once a week. So majority of the kids don't even study every day. And when they study, how many hours do they spend to study at home? Majority of the students only spend less than 2 hours a day for studying. So as compared to before this pandemic, they have to go to school every day, and at least they spend like 5 hours in schools to study, and then like they have to do homework at home, and they spend another 1 or 2 hours at home. So in total of like 7 hours of studying. But during this pandemic, they only spend less than 2 hours a day. So what happened? In the States and in European countries, they have a data of summer learning loss. So summer learning loss is the loss of learning skills of the kids during summer holidays. So normally they have like 2 months of summer holiday, right? So during this summer holiday, actually students lost 2.6 months of math skills, and they lost 2 months of reading skills during the summer holiday. Overall, a month of overall learning they lost, and it actually takes up 2 months for a student's brain development to get back on track on their first day of school. That's crazy, right? So after summer holiday, the first day of schools, it takes for them like 2 months to get back on track, to regain the skills that they had before the summer holiday. So you could imagine, like, during this pandemic, and we don't know when the schools will start like normal again. And then like, if we know now that kids only spend less than 2 hours every day, and they like, most of them don't even study every day, how many skills, like how many months of skills they lost. And this pandemic will be, this coronavirus will be with us for God knows when. So yeah, like, that's crazy. Like, I really couldn't comprehend like how many years of these students, especially in the remote villages, will be lost, and they will be behind their peers. So during the summer holidays, yes, kids lost math skills, reading skills, etc. And by the end of grade 6, students who suffer summer learning loss, they will be 2 years behind their peers. And we know already right now that kids who live in remote villages, I work in remote areas in eastern part of Indonesia where Taman Bacaan Pelangi operates. And then we know exactly that first grade students in these villages don't know how to read. And that is already 1 year behind of their peers in the big cities. Whereas like in Jakarta, if a girl or a boy wants to enter elementary school, they have to be able to read. And like these students in remote villages, first grade, definitely they can't read. So they're already behind. And then like with this pandemic, they will be even years behind their peers who live in big cities. So students who live in remote areas, who come from low income families, because they cannot afford having the internet and watching, learning modules from TV, for example, and students with special needs, this is the group that is like very vulnerable and have the highest risk to be left behind. So what can we do? We could learn from the best practices from other countries. For example, in Argentina, in Argentina, TV stations air learning programs for 14 hours. 14 hours. As compared to, yes, our government, like Ministry of Education, had launched Belajar dari TVRI, but that is only 3 hours, maximum of 5 hours. Sometimes they have like additional evening learning programs for the students in the whole country. However, on top of the TV program, they use radio station. So not only the national radio station air 7 hours of learning programs, but also like private radio stations air these learning programs in the whole country. So this is something that we could also apply or implement in Indonesia, because like it or not, in remote villages, if they have electricity, if they have electricity, then logically they could watch TV, right? But what happened in the field is not all households can afford having a TV at home. From what I see, normally only head of the village have TV or the school principal have TV, and normally they would gather together in one house to watch soccer or soap operas. But now, in the time of pandemic, it's not recommended to gather together like these kids to like watch TVRI together in one house, right? So yeah, maybe looking at the best practice from Argentina, we could also try to implement that, like having radio programs and collaborate with like as many as radio stations, because I know that people in these areas, they still also learn to radio. So this is something that we could totally apply. And also in Fiji, 2 radio stations also air a lot of learning programs for their community. Yeah, so Taman Bacaan Pelangi, a little bit introduction. We are a nonprofit organization. We build libraries for kids who live in islands in eastern Indonesia. So what happened to so we were thinking like what happened to the kids who live in those remote villages when the schools are closed. We asked around, and then like some headmasters said, oh yeah, we give them homework, but some of them also said, oh yeah, we actually don't know what to do. So in the beginning of when the pandemic hits Indonesia, and in the first week of the schools were closed, we initiated a so-called Paket Belajar program, in which we give out learning materials for the first grade students, so they could still study at home. So we give out this learning packets every week. So every kid receives 15 pages. The idea is like every day they have like 3 pages, one math page, one page of Bahasa Indonesia, and then 1 page for coloring. Every day they still do this so that they don't suffer from the brain drain, like we learned from the summer learning loss statistic from developed countries. So we distributed this paket belajar to more than 3,000 children in Flores, Sumba, and Raja Ampat, West Papua. Let's watch the video.
Saya ke Yesner untuk mengantar paket belajar dari teman-teman dari TBP untuk anak-anak kelas 1 di Yesner. Kalau ke Yesner itu harus lewat laut, jadi kita harus pakai perahu Johnson ya, kalau di sini bilang perahu motor laut. 1 jam kita tempuh perjalanannya sampai Waisai Yesner 1 jam. Setelah sampai di Yesner, besok harinya baru saya membagikan, itu pun juga saya di kepala sekolah dan wali kelas 1. Jadi saya kasih ke wali kelas 1, masyarakat ke wali kelas 1, di situ kami berkumpul beberapa anak untuk membagikan sambil kami belajar. Pesan dari Ibu Wali Kelas, Ibu Agustina di mana? Dari SD FK Maranatha Yesner untuk donasi yang memberikan paket belajar. Ucapannya terima kasih banyak, kiranya dengan adanya bantuan paket belajar itu semoga anak-anaknya juga bisa belajar pintar. Orang tua pun berterima kasih dengan adanya paket belajar yang dikirim oleh donasi untuk anak-anak di Yesner. Orang tua juga mengucapkan terima kasih.
Yeah. So from this program, teachers and headmasters and parents were very appreciative. Teachers especially, they say that thank you so much for giving us the paket belajar. So teachers use this materials as to make in remote villages. Teachers, a lot of them still have to go to their students' houses one by one. You can see in the first photo here, like some of the students gather in one house if they close nearby, and then teachers assist them. So yeah, we distributed this learning packets in collaboration with the schools where our libraries are located. So as an organization, we also have to shift our approach. So we try to also use online or digital to do online workshops for the teachers, and we, like, our team record video using YouTubes and Instagram to educate teachers and parents, like on, for example, like how to do storytelling at home, or how to do storytelling to your kids and stuff like that. And it's all, like, all these materials are available on YouTube. But again, like, this online approach will only benefit those teachers, those parents who live in the areas where there is internet connection. Our struggle is to reach those teachers who have no internet connections and no phone signals in the time of pandemic. So that is why we come up with the learning packets approach it's still, you know, like offline and still like using physical materials, like physical papers that we printed and distributed to those kids in those remote areas. So my recommendations, because we don't know until when the schools will be closed, right? So I would recommend our government, the Ministry of Education, to come up with interventions that are inclusive. So not only interventions that benefit the kids who live in areas with internet connection. You can't really force everyone to study online, right? Because like Indonesia is so big, we have like more than 17,000 islands, and there are still areas that have no internet access, not even electricity, so they can't really watch TV, the programs on TVRI. So please come up with interventions that are inclusive. Please think about those kids who live in remote islands, remote villages, and also please think about those kids with special needs as well. Like, again, the interventions should be inclusive. Yeah.
Your time up. Can you wrap up quickly?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. And capacity building for teachers and also parents are very much needed. And also local government at the district level, they can be more proactive and more innovative rather than waiting for instructions from the pemerintah pusat. And also develop guidance for schools, develop guidance for teachers on how to teach kids using new learning methods. And also the local government could allocate additional budget to support schools on the new learning methods. And again, same as the previous speaker, public-private partnership is very much needed. So let's all work together to handle this and also try to reduce the gap that is already wide between developed areas and like the remote areas in the field of education, and let's try to bridge the gap. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mbak Nila, for your explanation. Because our time is a bit limited, I will go straight to the Philippines. We have Abelardo, who will give us a presentation on how to support special needs children to pursue education as well as to access education during and after the COVID-19 pandemic. And Abelardo, the floor is yours.
Good morning, and I'm happy to be here. Thank you for this opportunity. Do you see my slides on the screen? Just to check. Hello, can you see my slide?
Not yet.
I hope you do.
Not yet.
Not. All right.
Not yet.
So please call me Archie for short. All right. Is it? Just let me know if you see the slides ready.
Yes, Archie, we can see your screen. You can start it.
All right.
Yeah, you can
All
see
right.
the slide.
Thank you for having me. Please call me Archie for short. And I am here in Manila, excited to share some of the practices that we have been trying out and testing and refining to help us navigate through the new norms of special and inclusive education. All right. In this presentation, I shall be providing a quick situationer of the education of children with disabilities amidst COVID. And I will be sharing some of the things that we do to help us more smoothly to this new norm of education. Lastly, I will be sharing some apps and online resources that I hope you will be able to take away and use on your children and students. Hopefully, there will be time for some Q&A as well. So UNESCO reported that about 15% of the world's population lives with some form of disability. That accounts to about 1 billion people. And this is more prevalent in low and income countries such as ours, most of the countries in ASEAN at least, and that makes this conversation very relevant. A study conducted by the Philippines Department of Education's Information and Communication Technology Services, gadgets, poor internet connection, lack of teacher training, lack of readiness of parents to be players are among the critical challenges identified for online and business learning. As insurmountable as these challenges sound, we get especially if we plan. In the Philippines, all schools mandated to craft their own learning activity plan. Hence, I conceptualized this multimodal framework of education that our schools use as a basis for crafting our own learning continuity plan. In this model, you will see that the student lies at the center of all our priorities. His or her health, development, and well-being should be our focus, taking into consideration the child's needs and strengths. And especially in education, all students should individualize education plan. Learning is a shared responsibility of the family, the school, and the community. This quarantine period, let us leverage on the opportunity for families to be more empowered in fostering their child's development. And since they will be learning for most of the time, I think this would be a great chance for us to foster the generalization of learning from school, virtually, to their natural environment, which is their house. The school serves as the primary source of education, and it shall mobilize all the resources, physical, intellectual, social, academic, in order to evoke hope, joy, resolve, and scholastic success to strengthen the student's spirituality, especially in times of crisis. In the outer part of the circle, you will see 3 general modes of learning delivery, which are separated by these programs. Basically, what we try to explain is the parents should have flexible options to choose how they would like their children to receive instruction, particularly this school year amidst COVID. Here, the parents' decisions may depend on several factors such as government regulations, the public health situation, is there at high or low risk for COVID contamination. They will also have to weigh the capacity and resources of the school that they're eyeing for their child. Of course, certainly, they will have to take up their individual and family situations also. I will be speaking in more detail about the learning delivery modes that we propose to offer our parents this coming school year. We have in-school learning for communities where in-person instruction is allowed by the state. And for distance learning, we have what we call synchronous and asynchronous learning, and blended instruction as well. So let me present this in more detail. In school learning, the child basically receives instruction physically in school. Whenever that's not possible, they may participate in distance learning, whether synchronously or asynchronously. In synchronous instruction, the students attend online classes from home and gets to interact with his or her teachers and peers live. Whereas in asynchronous distance learning, the students' parents can basically download instructional materials if they have internet access, or read their printed handouts and books and study at their own pace. In blended learning delivery modes, students may come to school on certain times during the week and study at home for the rest. This is just a summary of the 4 learning delivery modes. As you can see, in all types, students receive access to published materials. If they have internet access, they download instructional digital materials. For our organization, we use Google Suite and Google Classroom as our learning management system. And however, the main difference is in distance asynchronous learning, the students unfortunately won't get regular opportunities to interact live with their peers and their teachers. However, teachers make it the point that they do check-ins on these children at least 3 times a week. That's how we do it here in our organization through our common channels such as text, calls, or if parents prefer email, we can do that as well. Now, the government also is considering offering instruction through TV and radio. Here, self-learning modules will be converted to videos and radio scripts. And however, this option may be more viable for learners who have access to electricity and television. For child disability holistic development, therapy services are very essential. They include OT, speech therapy, and therapy. These services may be rendered in 4 learning modes, at least as far as our organizations are concerned. Through teletherapy. Here, the therapist basically coaches the parents on how to facilitate learning and therapy at home. The therapist may get to verbally interact with the client directly. However, there are some students, particularly those with sensory perception issues and attention issues, who might not be able to stay focused on the screen. This is why we do sometimes is have parents through the use of a cell phone and a smartphone attached to an earphone, then on with the therapist while streaming live videos of the child at work, and as he or she receives instruction, the therapist what to say and do. Also can put instructions in the child's native language, and the therapist devote at least 60 minutes of check-ins per week just to monitor the child's performance. In the Philippines, most families have cell phones anyway. In communities where in-person instruction is allowed, we can also offer home therapy, wherein we will be actually visiting the child's house to render intervention. And in some communities, therapy centers are allowed to receive clients as well, provided, of course, that strict health and safety protocols are observed. In drafting our learning continuity plan, we, of course, have to be evidence-based and guided by government regulations. There are also a lot of resources online for training and continuing development, such as courses offered by the WHO, and the information page from this can guide us in crafting our own programs and policies. So here are just some of the sanitation and hygiene practices that we can observe in schools. Many of these certainly you are already familiar with. In instances wherein in-school instruction is possible, it is ideal for the school to assign staff who shall be serving as a shepherding officer. Basically, he or she will be responsible to remind everyone to observe social distancing. In order to observe distancing in the classroom, classes can be made smaller. Perhaps the students can be grouped in 2 or 3 with alternating schedules. So here are just some photos of how our school was set up to facilitate social distancing. Rithna a while ago has spoken extensively about inclusive education. And just allow me to differentiate inclusive education from special education, which are considered to be among the more common educational placements for children with disabilities. In special education, children with disabilities are basically seen as a group. All of them have what we call an IEP, or an individualized education program, which outlines their goals and the corresponding learning activities to help realize these. Typically, students with more significant behavioral and learning limitations are actually seen in SPED classes. And also this is observed in communities and schools that have limited resources for full inclusion. I certainly agree that the ideal placement for all children with disabilities should be in mainstream classrooms, but SPED, as observed in many countries, including the progressive ones, still has a place, especially for those kids who need focused attention. Inclusive education is when the child with a disabilities is basically mainstreamed or included in a regular classroom, given modifications and accommodations. A very crucial component in inclusive education, which many schools unfortunately tend to forgo, is the promotion of a culture of diversity and inclusion, not just amongst the staff and the teachers, but more importantly, among the students themselves. And in a short while, I shall be sharing a little bit what our school has been doing to educate our neurotypical students about the different forms of ability and disability and the value of us embracing our differences. For a child with a disability to fully optimize learning in an inclusive classroom without compromising the needs of the neurotypical students, teachers have to practice creation of lessons following the principles of universal design learning. The bedrock of distance education is a strong school and parent collaboration. For our organization, we, weeks before, have already oriented our parents on our learning continuity plan. This is an extensive document which details all our objectives, our principles, our curricula, policies on grading, assessment, attendance, safety and health. And this certainly gave our parents that sense of security that the school will take their children's welfare very seriously. Apart from orienting them to our school's plan, getting, of course, their inputs for us to refine it further, we also organized workshops that teach parents the principles of teaching and learning with emphasis on online instruction. Other than these, we also included topics on promoting mental health. These days, children and youth can be more prone to mental health issues such as anxiety and depression after being isolated from their friends and peers and their schedules disrupted. And we believe that children with disabilities can be more prone to this, particularly those with developmental conditions such as autism, intellectual disabilities, Down syndrome. So we educate the parents about the red flags of mental health issues, as well as common interventions on guidance, education, sensory integration, language stimulation. I think I have 20 minutes.
Yeah,
So-
we have like 4 minutes. Thank you.
Sorry. So,
You
and
you
online
have for
learning as well.
you
So,
have
I'm sorry, it's breaking, but yeah, I'll make it faster. So,
take it.
before the classes start, we conduct one-on-one tutorials to teach our parents how to operate their laptops, their computers, their smartphones, and how to navigate through our learner management system, Google Classroom. We also conduct a trial class wherein the students, the parents, teachers get to meet before classes officially start. So on the first week of school, the focus is on helping our students adapt to the new system. And this is also when we conduct our student assessments, which will be the basis of our individualized education programs. We also administer the DIMPLES, or the Diversity and Inclusion modules for preschool to late elementary students, which includes videos, storybooks that neurotypical children the value for diversity. The curriculum have informal and formal components. Informal components are meant to spark joy. So during this time, we want kids to look forward to tuning in and seeing their teachers and their peers because they have fun things to do. Now, the core curriculum should focus on what we call most essential learning competencies, or MLCs. These are competencies that cannot be ordinarily learned by students if not taught in school, and connect to higher concepts across content areas, and they're applicable to real life situations. So basically what we did was we reviewed our curriculum and identified the competencies that are most essential. And we will be prioritizing these considering the screen time that we will be having with our students. There is a rule that a child, or that attention span is roughly 3 to 5 minutes per year of a neurotypical child's age. So hence, online classes shouldn't be that long. Otherwise, we would lose our children's attention. So we can also try allowing for intermittent breaks and teach concepts into chunks to foster retention. Assessments have to be formative rather than summative. So they should be meant to help the teachers identify strategies to make their instruction more effective. Exams, if not possible on site, can be done remotely through these methods. And the parents are also given the option to just have their child complete their exams after the quarantine period. If the child obtains a failing grade, we have adopted a policy that this will be considered as an incomplete instead of a fail, which the child can correct after the quarantine period. We also offer adjusted fees and socialized tuition programs and flexible financing options, considering that many families have lost employment during this period. Staff and teachers have to be very prepared and equip them with tech skills. And these are just some slides of apps that we find very useful to make our instruction more interactive with our students. You can have a photo and screen shot of these apps, and I hope you can try them on your kids and students. Here are just some photos of our kids during our summer online activities. And lastly, I dedicate this presentation to our joyful and very competent teachers who make distance learning quite engaging for our students. So watch this video that they have produced as part of a summer culminating event that we had a couple of weeks ago. Thank you. Have a beautiful day, everyone. Thank you. And that ends my presentation.
All right, thank you very much, Alfredo, for your wonderful presentation. Of course, there are many lessons from the Philippines, from what you have explained, that we can, of course, apply here in Indonesia. And of course, due to the limited time we have, we will now go straight to Q&A session. We have around 15 minutes of Q&A. For those who want to ask questions, you can raise your hands or you can type your question through the chat box feature on the application. While waiting for the first question, I want to ask a question for the three speakers. Of course, the problems that you have described, one of the most important reasons why those problems are happening is because the lack of awareness among the government and relevant stakeholders. And you and three of you mentioned the importance of raising awareness. My question is, how do we raise awareness? What are the concrete steps we can take so that the government, organization, policymakers, schools can understand the situation that the disabled students are facing during this pandemic? Maybe Rishna can start first to answer the question.
Thank you, Zulfikar. Yeah, this is, I can say in the perspective of international human rights law, it's an ongoing advocacy for the government because they are keep on changing of their staff and also the leadership, also the political commitment. That's why this is for our disability movement point of view. It's an ongoing advocacy that we have to do, over and over. And in terms of adjusting the situation during the pandemic at the moment, I think that the government should work together. Like Nila Tanzil explained before, we need to have a partnership all together and how we can solve. And then we also have to address the local wisdom that basically Indonesia has 17,000 islands around the country, and it's a lot of problem has been going on in each village, I would say, and also the island, maybe the remote island that never being touched by the government program. It's also part of the problem that we should address. And I think the government should have more, open and also a willingness to work together with all elements in their society and also with their community. And also the government should aware that they have a political consequences. At this point, they have ratified the CRPD. Either Indonesia and the Philippines already ratified the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disability. That means every 4 years they have to have a progressive realization. That's the CRPD language on how the government adopt the convention or human right-based approach, in particular for promoting inclusive education for children with disabilities. That's my point
All
of
right.
view.
Okay, thank you. But there's a different perspective on this.
Okay, thank you. So coming from a communications background, how to raise awareness? There are many different ways to raise awareness. We could use media as one of the medium. For example, like holding press conferences or distributing press releases on these issues, so that the media will pick it up. Of course, when you develop press releases, it would be more interesting and credible to use data that we have, and then also we could write opinion pieces, opinion articles, right? Yeah, and also like do advocacy, like one-on-one meetings or group meetings with the policymakers. We could also do campaign that involve various stakeholders. Yeah. And also conduct events, and also like these days a lot of people are using digital media, so we could totally use digital media to try to deliver our messages and involve like a lot of influencers, experts, and like people who have a lot of followers, so that like yeah, this is like one of the ways to raise awareness on this issue. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Manila, for your answers. Abelardo, maybe you want to add on that? No, I cannot hear you. Can you hear? Can you unmute yourself? Yeah. Have you unmuted yourself? Okay, no problem, Abelardo. And we have our first question. There is someone who wants to ask question. Siti Jumhati. But Siti Jumhati, you can unmute, ask your question, and you can direct your question to one of the speakers or to the three of them. Please. Siti Jumhati.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear my voice?
Yeah, we can.
Yeah. I want to ask to our speaker. I forget the name. Ibu siapa ya nama yang terakhir lupa.
Mbak Nila Tanzil.
Yeah,
Or right.
I
Okay.
okay. Ibu or Mrs. maybe ya, Miss. Miss, I want to ask you about the activity on your presentation. That's, I think it's amazing and have a lot of inspiration for us. Maybe as you know, I am a mother with have a big trouble of job, maybe from office and from home. What uh, what is the motivation for us as a mother to have some idea, or I think some, yeah, creativity for mother to have some activity, good activity, like as your presentation, because not everyone or person have a big motivation for that. So I need some clue, or I think some motivation from you, how to rebuild, to build our motivation for that activity. It's kind like we can have some goal, or can be usable for everyone, or for I think for our activity, so we can have a value for that activity. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Bu Siti. I think this question is for Mbak Nila. I think
Yeah.
it's in some motivation and practical suggestion on
Yep.
how we have a more practical activities in terms of education during this pandemic.
Yep.
Mbak Nila, are
Yeah.
you still with us? I think we lost. Mbak Nila, are you still with us? Can you hear me? Mbak Nila, can you hear me? Okay, before we reconnect with Mbak Nila, maybe Mbak Risna wants to answer the question. Mbak Risna, are you still here?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, maybe you can answer the question on, need some motivation and practical suggestion on how we can have more educational activities for the disabled student during the pandemic. Thank you.
Oh, yeah. So I'll try to address the questions.
I fixed it. Hear me now.
Should I continue?
There.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. So yeah. So Ibu, nice to meet you. To hear about the questions about how to have more motivation for the children. And I think when it comes to our children, the parents should be more creative and have more encouragement for your children. Just because we need an example, we need a role model within the family. And this is my perspective in terms of a woman with disability. And as a girl with disability, when I was kid, I learned a lot from my mother. So this is kind of a role model I learned directly from my mom, and she's quite a creative. When I was little, she's creating so many arts and crafts, and that lead me to try to exercise what my mom did. And I think your role as a mother is critically important to motivate your children, especially if you have children or a daughter or a boy with disability, because they are more likely mirroring on you. They are trying to have a role model that they can do as a kid. So I think it's very important on how to have encouragement and motivate to your children as much as you can. That's why I can apply it myself. I can paint, I can sew, I can do art and craft, I can do gardening. So it's because of my parents giving a model, giving examples, so then I can, imitate the good things about what my parents did when I was little. So I think this is kind of example, and I like drawing too. Even sometimes I express my feeling, when I get discrimination in school, I can draw, so that express my feeling. And this is kind of like self-healing that I can learn. Oh, it's amazing that I can do it myself to healing what the pain that I've been dealing with because of the abusive or bullying that I been through when I was elementary school. Maybe that can answer the questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, of course, that answered the question. I think the same thing with me as a disabled. When I faced bullying during elementary school, my self-healing was writing. Because my father taught me when you want to express your opinion, want to express your feeling, you can start writing. We have reconnected with Nila. I think Nila is here now. Nila, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I hope you already understand the question. You can straight answer the question. Yes.
So how to motivate ourselves, right? Is that the question?
Yeah. How do we, I think she needs some motivation and practical suggestion on how can we make a more creative activities, educational activities for the disabled student during pandemic.
Okay,
As
so
parents,
I'm also
especially.
yeah. So I'm also a mother of a 5-year-old girl, and whenever I ran out of ideas, I would go to the internet. I would Google some stuff, and I would also try to find ideas on YouTube. There are a lot of ideas on arts and crafts. Yeah, like creative and fun stuff for children that are available on the internet. So I always find like new activities for my girl, and there are so many, so many materials that are available on the internet. So that is like one practical tip that I could share. Other tip is like I would call my friends who are teachers, because I'm not a teacher. So I would call my friends who are teachers of elementary schools or kindergarten teachers. I would ask them, hey, give me ideas. What should I do for my daughter at home? And sometimes, like, some of my friends have like online creative arts and crafts class. So I would contact them and then, like, hey, give me ideas. And yeah, so those kind of classes are available online now, so you just have to find it in the internet, and then, like, we could enroll our kids in that.
All right. Okay. Thank you, Manila. Abelard with us.
Yeah, glad to be back.
Yeah,
Call me
okay.
up for sure. So
Okay.
it's very important for us to know our students well. So let's ask them what their interests are, what makes them happy, what their goals are, and use these and align these with the lessons that we would like to teach our students. Let's make sure that the lessons are appropriate in terms of the challenge they pose according to the child's needs and the development skills. We don't want to restrict them. We don't want to bore them if the tasks are too easy. Teachers can be very warm and engaging. You know, that video that I showed earlier was to show how teachers can be loving and warm, even virtually. You know, kids have to just look forward to seeing their teachers every day. We also can provide our students multi-sensory and interactive activities. Just because we're doing remote instruction doesn't mean we can't give like physical activities to our students, of course, through their parents and guardians. I also shared some apps in my slide that you can use to make your online presentations more interactive. There's an app that you can use to actually gamify your lessons and even create avatars to represent each of your students. So these are just some practical ways that can make your lessons more engaging and interesting for your students.
Thank you very much, Abelardo, for your answer. And before that, I want to thank all of the that you have mentioned are very important. I hope this can give us very crucial knowledge and awareness about the situation that the disabled community faces during this pandemic. And more importantly, I hope the attendees who are attending the event today can also share this information, because I think one of the biggest problems faced by the disabled is the lack of awareness among relevant stakeholders. So thank you very much to all of you, and I would as a moderator.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Bye.
everyone. Bye.
Have a good day.
Bye. Thank you.
Have a good day. Bye.
Nila, new hairstyle.
Archie, I miss you.